Good morning, Dan and Amy. I got to tell you, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday with Gorsuch's opening statement. His cloying, kind of treacly approach to this confirmation hearing is disarming. I believe it's genuine. I'm not suggesting he's being phony. And you know what, though? The best part about it, it is just punishment, because it is punishing, for room temperature IQs like Senator Stuart Smalley, who he just frustrated to no end, did Gorsuch yesterday. But there was a pointed moment, and it was a great one, because the Democrats are so desperate to try and find something they can hang on Gorsuch, and I think they realize that this
But they can't. It's hard to find something to dislike him about.
Or to trip him up. And I think they see the exercise as futile. And so they're just trying to kind of ring the dinner bells for the various children they need to feed politically. One of them is dark money. Ooh, dark money.
Did you say dark money?
And this topic was taken up by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. And that was the moment where Gorsuch put it back on the Senate as well. He should. Listen to this exchange.
Want to know who is behind that, and, well, answer that, and then I'll go on to a related question.
Senator, that's a policy question for this body.
Well, it's also a question of disclosure. You could ask right now that as a matter of courtesy, as a matter of respect to the process, that anybody who is funding this should declare themselves so that we can evaluate who is behind this effort.
Senator,
right? That wouldn't be a policy determination. That would be your values determination.
it would be a politics question. And I'm not, with all respect, Senator, going to get involved in politics. And if this body wishes to pass legislation, that's a political question for this body. And there's ample room for this body to pass disclosure laws for dark money or anything else it wishes to, and it can be tested in the courts. So, Senator, with all respect, the ball's in your court.
Ooh.
Boom.
That's about as
mic.
yeah, that's about as much of a throwdown as you're going to get from Gorsuch. White House is a liberal from Rhode Island. Is talking about this judicial crisis network that is running ads and other marketing behind the Gorsuch nomination, and White House wants to know, who's behind it, who are the nefarious
the dark
people.
money.
And here's the thing: if you go back on this, because what he said, he wants disclosure of donors. It would be useful too, maybe if Gorsuch gets another bite at the apple, to inform ignoramuses like White House of the basis for the protection of donors for nonprofits, C3s and C4s. You know what the basis is? It goes back to a case, NAACP versus Alabama, where the state of Alabama during the Jim Crow era was trying to force the NAACP to disclose its donors so the state of Alabama could target those donors. So that's why there is privacy for donors. That's the philosophy behind it, is to protect people from retribution by those in power. Might be something for consideration, not just for White House, but for everybody who hears this Pavlovian dark money phrase that the left uses without understanding the public policy rationale behind it. For more on the Gorsuch nomination and Obamacare replace, that's coming over to the Senate, according to Mitch McConnell, next week. We're pleased to be joined by our friend, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson. Senator Johnson, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, guys. How you doing?
Morning. So how Ben Sass, your colleague there in the Senate, said yesterday that a lot of the senators are trying to turn Gorsuch into a TV politician with some of their questioning that is not productive. Well, what was your take on how Gorsuch has been treated and the quality of the questions that have been put to him in the first 2 days?
Well, first of all, he's behaving like a judge, and I'll tell you, he won me over when he was first nominated with a simple quote. It is the role of judges to apply, not alter, the work of the people's representatives. A judge who likes every outcome he reaches is very likely a bad judge. stretching for results he prefers rather than those the law demands. That's what liberals hate about judges. They actually want super legislators. They want to get the result they prefer politically. You can tell in White House's question, in a lot of Democrats' question. They want a judge that will rule the way they want to based on politics because they can't pass their wacko legislation through the legislators, so they rely on the courts to do it. And the reason they want disclosure in terms of political action committees, that kind of stuff, is exactly what you talked about, Dan, is they want to target their political opponents. Take a look at what Lois Lerner did on the IRS. That we have a history of these types of things. So, again, the left couches all of its policy in these glowing terms, these wonderful terms. But in the end, they're the ones that want to target political opponents. They're the ones that don't want to judge. They want super legislators, liberal activists. And they just, they're in a primal scream because they're not getting their way.
And partially this is a dog and pony show. I mean, they tried to get him on President Trump several times when they asked him about the criticism of judges and is it demoralizing? He said, yes, it's demoralizing. But do you think in the end, obviously, he's going to pass with flying colors?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, they can vote against him, but Judge Gorsuch will be confirmed.
Well, so there's that. Okay, so that's settled. That's a big one out of the way. That's good. And I'll tell you why it's good, too, because you've got that Janus case. The Seventh Circuit just ruled on that Janus case, the fair share case, that is essentially a de facto companion case to the Fredericks v. California case that stalled after Scalia's death. And with Gorsuch's confirmation being seated on the bench, if the Supreme Court takes up that case again, which it seems like they might be likely to do, that really changes the landscape for public sector unions in this country.
Well, again, having a ninth vote, a swing vote, is going to be incredibly important. But at the same time, it's not like we've been in the midst of a constitutional crisis. If this court split 4-4, and that just shows you the politicization of the court. So many of these decisions should be 9-0.
Right. But
if they split 4-4, the lower court decision stands. So again, the left has been in the midst of this primal scream. There's been some huge crisis. There hasn't. We decided. Mitch McConnell led the effort, but all of us running for election supported him. Said, no, well, let's let the American people decide not only the direction of the country, but the direction and composition of the Supreme Court, and that's what we're doing right now.
All right, tomorrow's a big day for the Obamacare repeal vote in the House. What do you think is going to happen? And some are saying that it's already DOA in the Senate.
Well, again, I can't predict because I don't know what the final product's going to be. I can tell you that the main problems conservatives have with it is, first of all, the bill really does not address, exactly how to lower premiums. That's left for the second bucket for regulatory reform, and that's uncertain. And I think we have not, for example, pressed the Senate parliamentarian to find out how much of the bill we can actually repeal. Because if we repeal the market reforms, I'd call them market distortions, the things that actually have in Wisconsin caused premiums on the individual market to double and triple, that gives us a lot more latitude, more tools in our toolkit for actually replacing it with reforms that will bring down premiums, which is the number one goal that we ought to be really setting for ourselves, repairing the damage done by Obamacare and then transitioning to a healthcare system that actually works for people, driving down the cost of healthcare while you're driving down the cost of insurance and the cost of the American taxpayer as well. So I think we've kind of got our order in terms of the buckets out of order. I think we ought to concentrate more on lowering premiums in this first round, and I think that's what the House bill is failing to deliver, quite honestly.
But now your fellow cheesehead there, House Speaker Paul Ryan, said there's a lot of wins for conservatives in this bill, including expansion of health savings account, block granting Medicaid funds to the states, allowing them the flexibility to include a work requirement, as well as repeal of all the Obamacare taxes. Of course, you can point to the CBO score now that shows its deficit reduction, the CBO projection that over the next several years you will see premium reductions. So he's got those on the conservative side of the ledger that he's suggesting are the reason, provide a rationale for conservatives to support the bill.
Yeah, I mean, he's right on there. There are a lot of good things in the bill, but again, there's an important element. I'm just giving my analysis in terms if it doesn't pass the House, it's because it doesn't, from my standpoint and a lot of conservative standpoint, target the real damage done by Obamacare, and that's the dramatic increase in premiums, leaving that for Tom Price to do, and maybe Tom Price can do it, but I think if they want to get conservative support, the administration, Tom Price, is going to have to lay out exactly, this is the regulatory reform we're going to be able to enact, this is exactly how we're going to drive down premiums to give people confidence that the whole package will actually work for the American public.
I know that there's 3 stages to this health care reform, but at any point in time, do you think people, if they like their doctor, they could actually keep their doctor?
Well, it ought to be a real goal of ours. And the best way of doing that, again, is drive down premiums so people can actually afford to purchase their own health insurance. That's really what we should be focusing on. And if they can do that, then they can decide the type of network they're going to be in, what doctor they're going to actually choose. The problem with Obamacare is it forced people into higher, more expensive health care plans, and the coverage was worse. The deductibles were higher. Out-of-pocket maximums were higher. It focused in and narrowed the networks that people could actually utilize because there are so much fewer choices. And of course, that's what Obamacare is going to do. Is going to open up competition. Consumers were supposed to have more choices. We've had dramatically fewer choices. So Obamacare has been a disaster. These individual markets, if nothing is done, will collapse. We need to try and stabilize the markets, but we really need to focus on lowering premiums so that people can actually access their doctors and access health care.
Over the last several years under Obamacare, you were one that led the fight against kind of the ruling class political mentality when it came to health insurance, suggesting that the members of Congress and their staffs should not have better health insurance at lower costs than is available to the American public. Is that still your posture with respect to this this repeal and replace, whatever form it takes?
Well, unfortunately, that conversation just has totally gone by the wayside. My objection there is that Congress specifically, now these are Democrats, specifically voted not to allow the federal government to contribute to members of Congress's plans in the exchanges, and then when it came right down to it, they said, "Oh, well, we're not going to like that." So let's have the administration just basically violate the law. So again, we have. Right now, I have no idea where this health care bill is going to land, exactly how that's going to be affected. But no, I think one of the things that upsets the American public more than just about anything else is when Congress exempts themselves from the same laws they impose on everybody else. And so we ought to be working toward completely equal treatment under the law in whatever piece of legislation we're working on.
All right. He is Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson. Senator Johnson, thanks always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
And
Bye.
he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.